Hello, I'm Ed Fuquay, Young Adult Librarian Extraordinaire here at Woonsocket Harris Public Library.
And I'm Miss Gabby from the Children's Department.
We're here for another episode of Booktalking, and I do in fact have a book.
Once in a blue moon.
It's amazing. Yep. You would want to talk about the Mandela Effect.
Yeah, this is one thing. When we were doing conspiracy theories, this is what I've always heard about. But
it's not really a conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
I think it's a fascinating quirk of human nature that I really would love to discuss. And also that, and in a broader sense, how our memory works or doesn't work, more likely.
It plays tricks on us so many times that I think I'm going like actually crazy sometimes.
It can be very, very weird. The Mandela Effect, for those that don't know, is sometimes it's considered a collective false memory that's shared by a bunch of people, or it's when your definitive positive memories that you're absolutely sure about are totally contradict with known reality.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's named after Nelson Mandela, the former head of South Africa. Can you describe what it is?
Yeah, so I don't know the exact backstory, but wasn't it because people thought he died on this?
He'd been in prison for a long time, and people remember him having a funeral, like back in the 80s.
Yeah.
In fact, he got out of prison alive and went on to become the head of South Africa until he died in 2013.
So that people just thought he died a certain time ago, so then they called it the Mandela
Effect. Yeah. And it was coined by someone, and once they thought of it, all of a sudden there were a million examples of this everywhere. Now, obviously, the human mind has always worked this way, but until someone brought a name to it, no one really had any way of studying this phenomena. So suddenly you can go online and find lists of like 50 different things that everybody believes that just aren't true. Some of them are just misremembering or misappropriating things,
definitely.
And some of them are much like stronger. One of my favorite ones, which is what I brought the book for, is the book about bears. The authors of this book?
I know, the Berenstein.
Berensteins, yes. Virtually everybody in the free world believes that it's Berenstein Bears.
See, I can't say anything because I did too. I went my whole
so did I.
My whole entire childhood.
Yeah. This one is an easy one to understand. It's much easier to understand than the Nelson Mandela funeral. For one thing, I know I first read these books when I was a little kid.
Yeah, me too.
I was just barely learning how to read.
Yeah.
So I probably just skimmed over the author's name and didn't really pay the slightest bit of attention to it. And since there's so many more names in the world that end in Steen than end in Stain, you just automatically, when you see the name, you glance at it, you assume that it ends in Steen, Berenstein. It sounds right. But in fact, the author's name is Berenstein. And so the original authors aren't on the book anymore. Now their son is doing it, so it's still Berenstein Bears. And it always has been.
See, but the thing is, when I was little, they had the show about it too. I don't know if it was around when.
No, I never saw it.
But I don't know, I feel like even when like the show was around, I always remember hearing Berenstein.
You heard what your brain said to you was true.
Yeah.
Your brain automatically like self-corrected that in a way that doesn't really it wasn't really true.
Because I remember me being maybe like 4 or 5 years old singing to the theme song about it. And like, I don't know, I feel like, I don't know. It messes with you when you're like older, and then you're like, you go your whole entire childhood thinking it's one thing.
Yeah, it is very weird. People who believe in conspiracy theories will say that it originally was Berenstein, but they changed it because that sounded like too Jewish.
Yeah.
But that's not true.
No.
It's always been Berenstein. That has always been their last name. They've always been the Berenstein Bears. It never changed. The memories people have of that are just not true. Another funny thing I ran across today was Curious George. Remember Curious George?
Oh, the tail conspiracy.
Does he have a tail?
Yes, he does.
No.
No?
Not really, no.
Seriously? He doesn't have a tail?
No.
See, this is what I mean.
I could have brought those books too. We have them on the shelf. Yeah.
Oh my god.
He doesn't have a tail.
And like, this hurts because these are like shows that I grew up with. Oh my god, he really doesn't have a tail?
Some monkeys do, but not him.
Oh my gosh. See,
it's because we associate monkeys as having tails, even though only like half the species do.
So I'm just like imagining in the show that he had a tail the whole time?
No, that struck me today. Oh yeah, I know exactly how you feel, literally, because I was struck by something today that I learned for the very first time.
What?
Star Wars, which I've seen like a dozen times. Okay? C-3PO has a silver right leg. It's not gold, it's silver.
Really?
Yeah. From the knee down, it's actually silver. And Anthony Daniels confirmed until the most recent trilogy, his leg has always had
A silver part?
silver. Yeah, from the shin on down,
Wow.
it is silver. And Lucas did that to make it look like he's an old beat-up droid who's been replaced with replacement parts that didn't quite fit, like an old Chevy or something like that.
But like at the same time though, his whole body is gold.
Yeah, the rest
so
of his
you're
body is gold, which is all you really focus on. And they say the reason why most people never notice this, as in like 99% of the people never notice this, is the fact that, first of all, the outfit was really uncomfortable and hard for Anthony Daniels to wear, so he mostly only wore it from the waist up.
Yeah.
Like half the shots, at least half to 75% of the shots in Star Wars are of C-3PO only from the waist up. So he wasn't wearing his metal leggings. And when he is seen, it's always at a distance, but you really can't tell the difference in color. Or R2-D2 is gliding along beside him, and since he always rides on C-3PO's right side, he'll often block the view of the leg.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's been that way since forever. And it's now it's coming out. Now you go back over the things, and Anthony Daniels even said when they filmed the first Star Wars movie, which takes place in the desert under a really bright sun, his right leg was so much more reflective than the rest of it. They actually had to rub something across it to dull down the shine, so it wouldn't like just glow.
Just like a bright
Yeah.
light on the ground.
So to him, it was always been really obvious that his leg looks like that, but the
Yeah.
audience never noticed it.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, and I learned that just today when I saw a list of things from the Mandela Effect.
Yeah.
Um,
There's another one from Star Wars too, the Luke, I am your
Yeah,
father.
yeah. Vader does not say, "Luke, I am your father." Everybody recalls it that way, including me. But you
Yeah.
actually watch the film, and he says, "No, I am your father."
That's not right. That
It-
doesn't feel right to me.
We want him to say Luke because that's such a personal moment between father and son.
Yeah.
But it's not what he says at all.
Wow.
Well, I think in some ways, the Mandela Effect is a little bit like fanfic, in that you change things the way you think it should be.
We're making our own stories in our head.
It would be a cooler scene if he said, "Luke, I am your father." And what happens is Luke says something about his father being dead, and Vader responds, "No, I am your father." The first word in the sentence is no. We remember it differently to make the scene even more powerful because we know what a strong scene that is.
Yeah. Like it's even on shirts though too.
It is, I know, it's everywhere. The same way, like William Shatner never said, "Beam me up, Scotty."
Uh-huh.
He said, "Scotty, beam me up," and "beam me up," and "beam me up now," and things like that. But he never actually said, "Beam me up, Scotty."
This is messing with my head.
Yeah, he said every word in that sentence several times, like once per episode. But he never actually said, "Beam me up, Scotty." There's an old movie called Casablanca. And the famous line from that movie is, "Play it again, Sam." And the line is never spoken in the film.
Really?
Yeah. Everybody remembers it. In fact, Woody Allen did a tribute to Casablanca called "Play It Again, Sam." But the line is not in the movie. It's the love song the couple has that broke up and came back together
Yeah.
again. And Humphrey Bogart's character asks the guy who plays the piano in his bar, "Play it, Sam, play it." And then she comes in later and says, "Play it for me, Sam." But he never says, "Play it again, Sam."
Wow.
Yeah.
See, the funny thing is, like, I understand maybe like one or two people, like changing it up, but if it's like a whole entire world, pretty much like having like same exact experience.
Yeah, it's a human nature kind of thing. Like I said, everybody wants the line in Star Wars to be slightly stronger than it actually is. Like I have a personal problem with that because I'm a professional writer, and I went to film school, and I'll sometimes watch a movie, and in my head I'll be re-editing the movie. I was describing a scene in a James Bond film to my wife. It's a scene where they do a scene with Bond and the bad guy, and I think it's from The World Is Not Enough, and they play the song London Calling from the Boomtown Rats. Now I thought it was a really good scene in the theater, but I also thought that I could have made that scene better. So in my head I re-edited it, changed the cuts in the camera to re-edit it.
I can just picture you in the theater with the actual like script, putting it
I
in
was
the margin.
I was describing the scene to my wife, and I suddenly froze halfway through, and I thought, is that actually what happened in the scene, or does that only happen in my head? And so I found it on YouTube. Someone had taken out that shot. It's one of the Pierce Brosnan ones, and they actually had that, and I was totally misremembering it.
Wow.
I mean, obviously, see, it's Pierce Brosnan, and there's the bad guy, and they play London Calling. But the actual camera cuts were all, I can remember the ones in my head so much more vividly than what was actually in the film.
That's crazy.
That may only happen to like writers and
Yeah.
directors. But it definitely happened to me. And one of the weird things we have these days is everyone knows about the Mandela Effect. So the difference between reality and fantasy is really tricky.
Yeah.
There's a comedian named Sinbad. Are you familiar with this story?
No.
Okay, there's a guy named Sinbad. He's a comedian. Now, everybody believes that he played a genie in a movie called Shazam.
I've heard of that, but I've never
Yeah.
watched it.
Well, Shazam doesn't really exist, except in the Captain Marvel movie that DC Comics
Yeah.
did. But he never played a genie ever in his career.
Oh, wow.
He was a comedian, he was in several movies, but he never played a genie. What happened was Shaquille O'Neal, the basketball player, did a movie where he played a magical genie, and that was called Kazam. It was a pretty terrible film, but Sinbad took his name from the Arabian Nights.
Yeah.
And Aladdin and the Magic Lamp with the genie are also from Arabian Nights. So subconsciously, people connected the comedian Sinbad with the movie about the genie, even though they have no actual connection.
Yeah.
But where it gets weird is, as a parody of this, the actor Sinbad did a trailer for the false movie Shazam. He went into YouTube and shot a trailer for a film that doesn't exist.
That's funny.
Yeah.
He kicks back at it.
Talk about blowing people's minds. The person who first discovered this effect believed that in some ways people were tapping into alternate realities. That this is actually proof that there must be different, realities that exist side by side. It's like our brains jump the track a little bit, and we're actually seeing realities that don't exist. It explains why so many people believe the exact same false thing. There's also the feeling this is some kind of glitch in the matrix. That this is all that's proof that our reality isn't really as solid as we think, because it's constantly changing around us. Or is it time travelers? The result of time travel is going back and altering things. So when we call something happening, but actually it happened completely differently.
See, that's what I want to ask really quick. Does time travel exist, do you think?
There's no evidence of it.
No?
If there was evidence, it could be covered up so much that we'd never know. Right now, there is no scientific theory that would allow us to travel through time, like back and forth. So any kind of theory that depends on time travel has to do a lot to prove that it's true.
Because in the catacombs, have you ever heard about that?
No.
They have this, I don't remember what it's called, but they have this thing where I guess they time traveled all the way back to the AD years and stuff. So I feel like people are close to it,
Scientists are working on it. It's been something you've been working on for a while now. It might not be possible.
No?
It's Einsteinian physics allows for some kind of time travel, but only forward, not backwards. What everybody wants to do is go backwards.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. With the use of hypergravity and black holes, you can actually slow down time. So you can spend a day in the edge of a black hole and come back and 100 years have passed or 1,000 years have passed on Earth.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
That is apparently true, although there's no way to actually test it except mathematically with formulas. We can't really go out in space and do it yet. But the Mandela Effect and things like that are probably not time travel.
No.
They're more likely just our memory playing tricks on us, because the fact is our memory isn't really as good as we think it is. And this is very disconcerting to a lot of people. Many people would rather believe that there are time travelers mucking around with our reality than believe that the things they have in their head just aren't true.
It's their own self,
Yeah.
egos, I think.
Yeah, people, and we define ourselves by our memories. We know who we are because of what we've done in our lives. And if it turns out that we're misremembering it, then what does that say about us?
We're stupid.
Well, it's not a question of stupidity, because
we're wrong.
Yeah. People will not admit they're wrong. It's something that we see a lot of these days, even though sometimes it's patently obvious. No, you're just misremembering that. We should always be humble about trying to remember something.
And that's very impossible for some people.
It's very difficult. People think memory is also like playing a video. You click on a video on your computer and it comes up and you can fast forward or reverse it or something like that. That's not how memory works at all. Our brain stores long-term memories. And when you try to remember something, you're not just popping the video up on the screen. What happens is you'll say, oh, what happened that day? And your brain will tap into all the little details you remember and string them together. But in a sense, each time you recall something, your brain is crafting a new memory.
Really?
Yeah.
So it's pretty much it takes certain things and then it kind of just fills in the blanks?
Yeah.
Wow.
Usually, there'll be if it's a really important day where a lot of exciting things happen, your memories will often almost always be very, very similar.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to recall something that happened and there's nothing distinctive about that day to remember, what did you have for breakfast 2 weeks ago on a Thursday? Nobody knows. Yeah, you have no way of knowing that.
Wow.
So in a sense, the way your brain stores memory is imperfect to start with. People forget things all the time. They also subconsciously add things and aren't aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
And they can also misremember sources.
Wow.
Sometimes people say things to me, and I will say, really, where'd you hear that? And they can't remember where they read that at. I'm thinking, I'll bet that was from some Facebook page or somebody's blog rather than, say, a news source.
Yeah.
And they can't remember where they heard it from.
Yeah.
But they've stored it in their long-term memory as being a fact, even though they can't attribute it. They have no way of knowing. Now, if all this is bothering you, you should really brace yourself.
Okay.
Because there are ways of planting false memories in people. And it happens all the time.
Okay, please tell me this.
Yes, it is called the lost in the mall effect.
Okay.
Yes. It's based on a series of studies done by a psychologist, Elizabeth Loftus, who is examining how memories are created. There had been a real issue with recovered memories, people suddenly remembering things that happened to them years ago that previously they had no memory of.
Yeah.
And she felt that our memory was so fallible, you couldn't depend on things like that. Now, recovered memory is a whole broader topic we can discuss on another day if you want to.
Okay.
But the important thing about this is she wanted to see if you could implant a memory. So she had college students, and she would call up their parents and their grandparents and get a list of things that happened to them when they were young.
Mm-hmm.
Like 3 real things that happened. And then she would add in a 4th thing that wasn't real.
Mm-hmm.
The 4th thing would always be when you were 5 years old and you got lost in the mall. Remember, and an old guy found you and brought you to the security and so forth? Yeah. That's the memory that didn't happen. And she made sure each of them had never been lost in the mall by talking to the parents and grandparents. And she would give a brief thumbnail of each memory. The time you went to Disney World, the time, you did this, and then add in the time you were lost in the mall and ask them to recall every detail they could of when that happened to them.
Wow.
Now, 25% of the people would automatically accept that they'd gotten lost in the mall as being true. Yeah.
Wow.
And not only that, as they try to write a little paper about each one of the events that happened to them, they would add in details, because the original story was really sketchy. She gave them almost no information, but they would add in like what time of year it was and what the old gentleman looked like who found them and what security said to them and things like that. All things they were totally making up.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
But in their brain, they thought it was.
She was asking them to recall something, so their brain was just adding in things that could have happened, things that sounded right, things that sounded good for this memory. And then when she asked them like a year later, they recalled getting lost in the mall as vividly as anything else that's ever happened to them,
Mm-hmm.
even though it was completely never happened.
Oh.
It is terrifying. And it's particularly bad because some people, unscrupulous like police officers and things like that, know how memory works.
Mm-hmm.
And they can not coerce, but they can trick people into remembering things that might not be true.
Mm-hmm.
Like if someone's reporting a crime, but they really didn't get a good look at the guy.
Mm-hmm.
Now the police have a suspect. He's a guy who has a big tattoo on his arm.
Yeah.
So as they're interviewing the person, they'll say, so what kind of tattoo did he have? Instead of saying, did he have a tattoo? Then they'd say, I don't remember seeing one. But if you say, what kind of tattoo did he have?
Mm-hmm.
The person will come up with some kind of an answer to that. And they may well think from that moment on that they saw a tattoo on the guy's arm, when in fact it was never there at all.
That's not good though. At the same
It is
time.
terrible.
Because,
There have been many innocent people found guilty and sent to jail over things
Yeah.
like this. These experiments were done by the psychiatrist to try to get rid of those kinds of like false witness syndromes. It's the way our memory works is so tricky, it's so difficult to really understand, and it's still being studied. It's not something that anyone really knows all about yet.
Yeah.
Some people say what we have in our mind is a web of association. One thing will lead to another thing in your head, which leads to another thing.
Mm-hmm.
Something will happen that reminds you of the day when this sort of thing occurred.
Yeah.
But you have to be careful about whether it actually happened or whether it didn't. Now, the thing about Lost in the Mall, that's a really melodramatic one.
Yeah.
But if you're doing something like, let's say there's a really important day in your life,
Okay.
like the first time you went to, I don't know, an amusement park or something.
Yeah.
And if someone asked you, what'd you have for breakfast that morning? And, you know, and there's a strong possibility you could have had pancakes. You could say, oh, probably pancakes. But the point is, as soon as you say those words aloud, your brain takes the word pancakes and associates it with Disney World.
Yeah.
So when someone asks you a month or a few weeks later, what did you have that morning you went to Disney World, you'll say pancakes automatically because you placed that in your memory accidentally.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy to think.
It is.
Because, like, I don't know, I feel like you can manipulate it.
Unfortunately, that can and has been done. The way we remember things is based on so many subtle things.
Yeah.
Like the sense of smell is associated very strongly with memory.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever like smelled something and automatically it takes you back to something? Yeah.
Yeah.
We all do that because that's the way our brain is wired. And so, like for instance, my wife, after her brain surgery, lost her sense of smell. And she's nervous if this is going to affect her long-term memory. She can't associate anything with the scent anymore.
Yeah.
And so she's not sure what effect that's going to have on her. And I've already seen the effect it has on me because we remember things in our past that had the strongest emotional resonance to us. Now, I suffer from depression, and so I often have that like sort of emotional deadening effect that being depressed does to you.
Mm-hmm.
So I tell people that I have whole years of my life I can't remember, and they always laugh it off like it's a joke, but it's actually true.
Yeah.
There's a big chunk of my life I can't remember very well at all. Because we remember things that excite us or make us happy. Like on the other hand, when I think about my childhood when I was really young,
Mm-hmm.
I only have like scattered memories before like middle school.
Yeah.
And when I do remember myself being a child, I can't remember ever like skinning my knee or getting a bloody nose.
Mhm.
I can't even remember it raining or snowing when I was very young. Even though I know for a fact it rained on me, it snowed on me, I fell and skinned my knee, I absolutely guarantee, but I can't recall that.
Yeah.
It wasn't important enough to really sink into my long-term memory.
Mhm.
If I'd had some horrific accident as a child, like I fell out of a tree, I remember that.
Yeah.
I remember falling out of the tree and I went to the hospital, and I remember that. But anything else that happened that year of my life,
Mm-hmm.
no clue whatsoever. And like my mother and father both passed away now,
Mhm.
so I can't ask them questions about my childhood.
Yeah, so it's just like a blank void.
Yeah, at my father's funeral, I talked to my older brother. Okay, did I really do this? Did I really do that? At one point before he passed away, I was talking to my dad about we used to live in Minnesota,
Mm-hmm.
and we had lots of snow in Minnesota, tons of snow. And I always tell people I walked to school even though there was snow like up to my waist. And I said to my dad, did I actually do that?
Mm-hmm.
He said, yeah, you did. I said, you let me walk to school when the snow was like that bad? And he said, the elementary school was just down the street, and your mom could see you right from the window of our apartment. And like I remember our apartment, and I remember what the exterior of the school looks like, but I had forgotten they were literally like on the same street.
How would you let me do that?
I know. He's like, you let me walk in the snow? I was like, yeah. It was like a block or two away, literally.
Barely even had a chance to like get a cold.
Yeah. But that's your brain playing tricks on you. And it's not a bad thing. Sometimes people just have to accept the fact that they've forgotten something or they've misremembered something.
Mm-hmm.
And you shouldn't bet your life or bet something really, really important on something your memory you're trying to dredge up.
Yeah.
Because you never really know. It doesn't mean anything wrong with your brain. Our brains really aren't hardwired for that kind of long-term memory. You can practice mental exercises to improve your memory if you feel like it.
Mm-hmm.
So it is possible to get better at remembering things. But it's still tricky because our brains are taking in information all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And your brain isn't big enough to store that much knowledge.
So it just kind of lets out.
The vast majority of it you'll never remember.
Wow. In out one ear, out the other.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Sherlock Holmes once said that he tries to empty his brain of things that couldn't be important in solving crimes. He once claimed not to know that the Earth revolved around the sun. He said to Watson, how could that possibly matter when I investigate a murder?
True.
I think he was kidding. But at the same time, the idea that you only have a certain amount of knowledge inside your head, and Holmes was worried about absorbing knowledge that wasn't going to be important to him.
Exactly.
I don't think in the real world we have to worry about that, but
It's still just like weird to think that
Yeah.
like, wow.
we define ourselves by our memories. And so to a certain extent, our sense of self isn't as solidly rooted as you would like it to be. But
Yeah.
that's the human experience. Human beings, I think, have always been like that. And we live in an age of information overload, so it might be getting worse, but no one did studies like this, 1,000 years ago. So we don't really know
Yeah.
if people in the past are any different than we are now. I'm betting they were about the same.
Probably.
I don't think the brain has changed in any kind of sense in recorded history.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
But,
Do you feel better or worse about your memory now?
worse? Because like I'm like, is everything I've ever said like a lie now that like I just kind of came up with? Like now I'm like contemplating whether or not I actually like know anything.
Don't let it undermine you.
Like now.
First
I'm
of
like,
all, every single person on earth is experiencing this. The
Yeah.
fact that you know this kind of thing goes on
Yeah.
makes you a little sharper about defending yourself. Or, like I said, when I told my wife about that scene in the James Bond movie, in the middle of it, I thought, I don't think that's right. Because I can remember recutting that scene in my head.
Yeah.
And I couldn't remember whether I was giving her what actually happened or what I wanted to happen in that scene.
So you have to double check yourself.
Yeah. And doing that and things you can easily verify
Mhm.
is not bad at all. There's nothing wrong with that.
You just have to kind of admit that you're wrong though.
Yeah, and sometimes people these days make life or death decisions based on facts they dredge up from their subconscious that they have no way of knowing whether they're true or not.
Yeah. How would a lie detector test work with that?
Well, with a lie detector, it doesn't detect lies. What it detects is a change in your heartbeat or your blood pressure.
Mhm.
When people lie, most people, they get a little excited because they're trying to pull one off on the police,
Yeah.
and so their heartbeat will go up, and their blood pressure will raise,
Mhm.
and so you have these cuffs attached to you to detect any changes in that.
Yeah.
If you really believe what you're saying, your heartbeat won't go up.
Okay.
Your heartbeat only goes up if you know you're lying and you feel guilty.
Wow.
Which is like sociopaths who don't feel any guilt over
Yeah.
murdering people sometimes will easily blow through lie detector tests.
That's not good.
Yeah, and there's plenty of people who are good enough actors to beat it. There's several different ways of beating the lie detector, which is why it is not admissible in court.
Mhm.
The cops can ask you to take a lie detector test, but usually you fail it royally, that can never be brought up in court.
Mhm. Wow.
Yep.
Wow. I feel like I'd always just be nervous on a lie detector test.
That would be my problem. I'd be so aware of what they were doing to me. But like the government uses it, they give lie detector tests to people before they get high security positions with the government. And I'm like, that's not even, I mean, it's legal in the sense that, they can do it. But making a decision about somebody's whole career based on that is just wrong. A
Definitely.
lie detector test isn't that good.
Yeah, no. Well, thanks, Ed.
See, you feel a little better?
A little bit, but I don't know. Based upon like the fact that like I don't remember my childhood as good as I know, and now
Yeah.
that my brain doesn't even know stuff now, it's a lot of things to take in.
Yeah, well, I mean, the important things that you feel strong emotions about will always stick with you.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'll never call it Berenstein.
Yeah.
I hope you know that. It's always gonna be Berenstein. I mean,
Yeah.
Curious George is always gonna have a tail.
Yeah, I only know about the Berenstein Bears because they've gotten the books off the shelf for people so many times. I
Mhm.
believe it was Berenstein until I got my first job in the library in
Yeah.
Providence. Yeah,
Have people like come up to you saying Berenstein, or have they come saying like?
they always say Berenstein. Yeah,
Yeah.
always.
Wow, that's crazy.
That's how prevalent it is. But now you know better. Knowing is half the battle, as G.I. Joe used to say.
Yeah, definitely.
All right.
My like heart is like beating from that.
Well, good thing you're not taking a lie detector test.
I know, I'd fail it. Like palms sweaty.
Yep, exactly. So anyway, that's how memory works, kind of.
Yeah. Good knowledge.
All right. So until next time, I've been Ed.
And I'm Miss Gabby.
Until next time, be safe.